Knowing when to retire your horse can be a very difficult decision to make, and it can be hard to tell when the time is right. Sometimes it will be evident, okay, this horse needs to stop being ridden. Other times, it's a little bit more subtle and you just need to make the decision yourself. While it will never be an easy decision to make, I'm hoping that this video can help make it easier and help you know when the time is right to retire your horse. Real quick, I just wanted to share something I've been working on. Every day we are putting new designs on our Etsy store. It's all about horses, so these can make great gifts for your horse friends, or they can make a great gift for yourself. The link is in the description and everything is currently 10% off. One of the most obvious reasons you will retire a horse is for an injury or an illness that keeps them from being ridden. A lot of times these horses may appear fine, but the extra weight on their back and being worked regularly can drum up some problems with their condition. And unfortunately, horses of any age can be affected by injury, and so you may see like a 3-year-old racehorse having to be retired from riding because they've gotten an injury. So it's just things like that, and that's why it's super important to communicate with your vet, because they will tell you the level of work that the horse can do. Other injuries that you may not really think about are injuries to the spine, so like in the horse's neck, especially the cervical area. If a horse is injured there, or if there's inflammation and swelling, it can make it really dangerous to ride them. So the best thing to do is if your horse has had an injury, you need to consult your vet and see what their workload needs to be. There are diseases that may force horses into early retirement. Any horse with a neurological disorder shouldn't be ridden, and the reason for this is, number one, a lot of times with neurological disorders, their balance is thrown off, and just adding the extra weight can make it really difficult for you to stay safe and for the horse to stay safe. Another very common disorder that I think is found particularly in quarter horses is the navicular disease. And this is where the navicular bone, which is in the horse's hoof actually, starts to degenerate, and it is a progressive disease. So in the beginning, you may just monitor it and work with it and change how you ride your horse, but over time, it is going to force your horse into retirement. So that's just something to stay on top of if that is something you know your horse has. Another sign that it's time to retire your horse is if your horse is unsound. Throughout your horse's life, they may experience being sound and unsound. It's just, there's so many things that can make your horse not be sound. And when I say sound, what that means is they don't walk right, so they're limping, there's some pain in their body somewhere that changes their gait. There are so many things that can cause a horse to be unsound, so stiffness is one of them. Just being sore and stiff in areas of your body can make the horse not move correctly. Injury can make a horse unsound, a bruised foot, an abscess. So in those short-term issues, like if your horse has an abscess or something, for the time that they have the problem, don't ride them. But there are long-term problems your horse may have where they're just unsound, and it just comes with age and aging and arthritis. A horse being unsound isn't just caused by pain in their hoof or their leg. It can be caused by pain in their hip. It can be caused by pain in their shoulder, in their back. It can be caused by poor saddle fit. So those are all things you need to look at when your horse is unsound. But the fact of the matter is, if you notice that your horse is unsound over a period of time, and no matter what you do, you can't really seem to fix it, it's usually time to retire them at that point. A lot of horses can live comfortably even being unsound where they can't really be ridden, but they can get along fine out in the field. So that's just another thing where you need to consult your vet. I did mention a horse being stiff and that causing unsoundness. In those instances, exercise is very important to the horse because it can actually help them loosen up and move more freely. How much exercise and what that exercise looks like, and if it includes riding, that all just comes down to what your vet says. So like I said, ask your vet if you have any questions about that. Soundness will probably be the biggest indicator when it comes to determining if your horse needs to be retired. So I just want to talk a minute about what are some signs that your horse is unsound. Number one, and the most obvious, is that your horse will be lame. Their gait will be off, they'll look like they're limping, their head will be bobbing a lot more, and that's a sign that there's pain somewhere in their body. Not all horses that are unsound come across as if they're limping. A lot of times soundness issues could develop into, you just seem that your horse is tripping a lot, and you notice that frequently. And if your horse is tripping a lot in the amount of work that you're doing, that can be a sign that the work may be too much for them. While this doesn't necessarily mean your horse is unsound, it does affect if a horse could be sound, and that is pain anywhere else in the horse's body. Pain in other areas of the horse's body can cause the horse to not move as they should. Some of those problems may be permanent, some may be temporary. Like let's talk about saddle fit, for example. If you notice that your horse's back is sore, and when you brush them, they wince, I don't think you should get on them at that point. But unfortunately, in the horse world, a lot of people are taught that even if the horse is in pain, you still work them and ride them as normal. When in reality, imagine if you were in serious pain, but you were asked to go do physical labor. So that's just something you have to remember, and that can affect your horse. And so if you do notice pain in your horse's body, you want to treat that pain first to see if it helps with your horse's soundness. Another sign that you may need to retire your horse is if you notice that your horse is struggling with the workload of being ridden. When I was growing up, I had a horse named Pepper. And Pepper was a great jumper. She was very brave and honest. She'd go over any jump you pointed her at. But one day I went out for a ride and she just about refused every single jump I pointed her at. Number one, you need to make sure that's not human error. But in this situation, I knew there was something wrong and that wasn't like her. And over time, I noticed it more, that she just wasn't willing to jump anymore, and she would be much more apt to refuse. That kind of led me down the path of realizing that she needed to be retired. And so if you notice things like that in your horse, where suddenly there's just something different about them, where either like if they're a jumper and they don't want to jump anymore, or maybe you go and you ride them and the next day you can tell like, oh, they are sore, and that happens numerous times, that's a good sign that they cannot handle the workload anymore. And that doesn't always mean to retire them. It just means you may need to change what they're doing, and you may need to make the work easier for them. Sometimes knowing whether to retire your horse will be more of a behavioral change you will see in your horse. So my parents just retired recently, and both of them, towards the end of their working careers, they were ready to be done, I'll say. And so I think some horses go through the same thing, where you will just notice that they don't like working anymore. They're not interested, they're not engaged, they seem dull. I mean, you can see that in young horses too. And if you have a young horse that's like that, I would say try and find something the young horse likes to do. If you just ride in an arena every day, try going out on a trail ride. But if you have an older horse who's put in their time and they're getting on in years and they just don't seem interested in work anymore like they used to, that can be a good sign it may be time for retirement. As your horse gets on in years, one of the best things I think you can do for them is helping them maintain their weight and their muscle. So you can do that through certain supplements or feeds or exercise, and just make it a very routine thing to work on muscle building, and that overall will hopefully elongate their careers of being ridden. You may be wondering, if your horse is still going strong and they're now a senior, is there a certain time you should retire them at? My personal answer to that would be there are certain activities you should retire them from. For example, jumping is one of them. So jumping is just harder on the joints. And if you have a horse that's 30 and still jumping, you may just be putting a lot of strain on their body. So if your horse is at 20 and 25 and they're still going strong, I would just kind of rework what you do with them. So maybe at 20 and 25, you just start trail riding them and you keep it easier compared to like hard work. That being said, I know endurance horses that are in their 20s and competing endurance, but you just need to keep an eye on your horse, and you also have to think about, if you are going to continue to ride them and work them, they are going to need maintenance. They are going to need feed and maybe supplements and just things that can help keep them healthy. One very important point I want to make is that older horses need maintenance. You're going to need to invest more money in them to keep them healthy, especially for the long run. So a lot of people get a young horse, and as the horse ages, they think that they can just keep caring for that horse as if it was young, you know, and they're not supplementing its diet with anything, they're not taking extra care of it in any way. That just isn't realistic. Like as people age, they need more care, they need more doctor's visits, they need certain medications and things like that. So you just need to keep that in mind with your older horses. If you want your older horse to stay healthy for longer, you need to put in the maintenance, and you need to consult a veterinarian to see what they would recommend. Whether you have a young horse or an old horse, us equestrians love to show our love for our horses. And so on my Etsy store, I have a ton of t-shirts for every horse rider out there. Whether you like funny shirts, whether you like sappy shirts, there's a shirt for you. So you can go check that out at the Equine Helper Etsy store.